Hi, everyone. We're talking about co-creation this week. I introduced the term co-creation last week when I was talking about design thinking. Basically, in that context, I was talking about it being part of a mindset shift, really away from this vision of strategy being done by executives, isolated in a boardroom, and then going out and selling and socializing that plan, shifting that mindset to one where you're engaging with your stakeholders throughout the process in a co-creation, in a testing environment. And so that when it comes time to actually unveil the plan, everybody already really knows what the plan is because they've been part of it throughout. I thought it'd be good to start with the definition of co-creation, and I found dozens of them. I picked this one because I thought it was perhaps the cleanest and simplest. So a creative co-creation is a creative collaboration between diverse stakeholders to define, clarify, create, and realize visions that provide value in a deeper sense. So what do we, when we're talking about stakeholders, who are we talking about? Basically anyone who has a stake in your organization. And in particular, what I think is important to think about is how would you involve employees in your organization? And I mean employees at all levels, across all functions. And I think that's particularly important when you're part of a large, complex organization, a government organization, a university, a hospital. How do you engage people that have a lot of diverse needs and employment issues? And then I think the other really key stakeholder here are the people who use the services or the products that your organization produces. And so I think there's a lot of value and potential power when you engage employees and you engage customers in the process. And I think that's magnified when you can bring those groups together in a creative process where they're actually interacting with each other, learning each other's perspectives, and building on each other's ideas. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. I wrote these words a little bit more than 4 years ago as part of an introduction to a project I was working on. And the project was to look at how the University of Montana could improve internal communication. And so there was a very small group of us who worked on this project. And I think that the mandate from the university's leadership, or certainly the concept was that we didn't communicate enough. How could we communicate more? Well, one of the things I think we discovered in the process of talking to people, we did what I've been talking about in terms of trying to diagnose the issues early on, and so we engaged with a lot of people who work on campus. And what we came to understand was that it wasn't necessarily an issue of us not communicating enough. There was plenty of information available about all kinds of things on campus. What it really boiled down to, a big part of our diagnosis was that there was a lack of engagement. There was a lack of curiosity on the part of a lot of employees to go out and find answers to the questions that they had. And so we built that into as one of our kind of core diagnostic things, that engagement was an issue. And as part of that process, we started looking into is engagement an issue across organizations? What we discovered was that Gallup, the people who do the Gallup polls, have had a long history of tracking employee engagement across the globe, actually. And so these are some statistics from the U.S. employment market. I guess first of all, let me define what Gallup says are engaged employees. They define it as those who are involved in, enthusiastic about, and committed to their work and workplace. So when you look at these statistics, it's not pretty. And this shows that only 3 out of 10 employees in this country are engaged in their work. 7 out of 10 are either not engaged or they're actively disengaged. They may be actively working against the organization's goals. They may be sabotaging what you're trying to do. This is going to be a a significant challenge that you will face as a organizational leader at some point. And so, one of the things one reason I wanted to bring this up is that I honestly believe that one of the best ways to combat uh, employee disengagement is include them in strategic planning processes. There's not just one reason that employees are disengaged, but I think certainly what I have found is that when you do engage with them, bring them into the process, um, it certainly increases their enthusiasm, their curiosity, their interest in making the organization's goals work. And so, think about that. We tried to do that when we were part of the university's strategic planning process. Our guiding policy we actually titled "Creating Change Together," and we included that concept in our kind of our principles. Last fall, I had an opportunity to go to a conference in Berkeley, California, that included corporate organizations, government organizations, nonprofit organizations, who were all interested in this idea of co-creation, crowdsourcing, and how it could tie in with being innovative in their organizations. And so I thought one of the most compelling stories was the story from the city of Calgary, and how they had really done an incredible amount of work in engaging citizens of the city in their innovation activities. So I've created a link in Moodle this week to this year-end report that they put out, and I encourage you to go through it and just see some of the activities that they've done and some of the outcomes that are part of engaging with their constituents and including them in part of the strategic design process. And how's this for timing? This Downtown Missoula partnership is just announcing the start of a city master planning, a downtown master planning process, and they are inviting people from the community to engage in that. So this Thursday evening, October 18th, 5:30 to 7 in the Wilma, is the first of many opportunities that people in the community will have to be part of a co-design, co-creation process with the Downtown Missoula Partnership. So, if you're here in Missoula, I encourage you to check it out, be part of the process, and to see how these consultants who are guiding the process are engaging with people. So, what I thought I would do for the rest of this presentation is share a couple of techniques, things that I've been involved with that relate to co-creation that I felt worked particularly well. One of them is an in-person technique that engages with technology. The other one is very much driven by technology, but then also relies on face-to-face interaction as well. So the first of those is a concept of a meeting concept called the unconference. You may have also heard the term open space technology or open space conferences. I've been involved in a number of these at the university over the last 3 or 4 years. I've included some of those here. I've done actually 2 unconferences around IT services on campus. I was involved in leading an effort to do an administrative advisory council unconference that really focused on a vision for the university. And then the UXM unconference, that was actually part of the strategic planning process. And that unconference in particular focused on how the university could improve the customer experience, both for students and for faculty staff who are customers of other campus departments. So basically, if you're not familiar with the unconference format, the idea is that it is a participant-driven event that then focuses on a specific theme. And so, really, you present a theme, you create a framework, but you don't have the agenda, you don't have the topics in place until the day of the event. So how does it work? Unconferences start with a circle, and the circle has some symbolic significance. What it symbolizes basically is that everyone who is in attendance has equal power. They're equally, they're the same distance from the center of power. And so, you know, you could have, in this case at the university, an administrative assistant and a vice president sitting next to each other, and they are equals in this process. And that's one of the things that you need to make people aware of, that, you know, people in power don't get to dominate the ideas in the conversation. Everyone has an equal opportunity there. All of the unconferences that I've been involved with have been, had somewhere between about 130 and 150 participants. So I think this photo was from the very first IT unconference that we did. There were about 150 people in this photo. So it's a good tool to engage a fairly large number of people at one time, and the unconference format can be larger. I think, you know, I've read of up to about 500 people involved in one of these events. So one of the keys is who's invited, who's involved in an unconference. I had an interesting experience in this very first one that we did where I was not involved in planning at the early stages, but the person who was leading that charge had to step out, and so I stepped into a leadership role midway through our planning. And so one of the questions that I asked is, well, who's going to be involved in this unconference? And I was told that the decision was made that it was only going to be IT people, technical people, and it was going to focus on technical issues. And so I questioned that, and I said, well, why wouldn't we involve end users? Why wouldn't we involve people in functional offices? And basically the response I got was, well, we don't trust each other enough to do that. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, if you don't trust each other, you're certainly not going to build that trust by avoiding each other. But I let it drop, and when the appropriate time came, I volunteered to be the one who did the marketing and created the invitations for the event. And I basically went against the wishes of the committee, and I did go out and I invited a lot of people that I knew were users of IT, people in our administrative and academic areas who maybe were frustrated by IT, were trying to solve issues or do things that they just weren't able to do because of our lack of support or services. And so I did that. I mean, there was certainly some discomfort with that. I think clearly the end result was that it was somewhat transformational to have IT people and end users in conversations together, basically for an entire day. They became more comfortable with each other. They learned from each other's perspectives. And you know, of all of the things that came out of this event, that might have been the most powerful and beneficial. So when you're in this circle, basically three things happen at the beginning of an unconference. One is the participants learn a little bit about the expectations, the principles of how the day is going to work. And so as an example of that, there are some laws. And one of the laws, for example, is the law of 2 feet. The law of 2 feet says that it basically puts the onus on each individual to be productive during the day. And it says if you are in a position, or you find yourself in the position during the day where you are neither learning or contributing to the conversation, it's your responsibility to use your 2 feet and go somewhere else where you can contribute or you can learn. The second thing that happens in this circle typically is that there are some very brief keynote speeches. We call them lightning keynotes, 5 to 7 minutes long at the very most. And so the idea is there is that you bring in people who have some provocative ideas, have some inspirational ideas. They kind of prime the pump, get people thinking about what the challenge of the day is. And then the third really important thing that happens in this circle is that it's opened up to the marketplace. And any person who's in attendance can come into the circle and they can propose a topic that they want to talk about. So when you do that, you take ownership of that topic. And so You write down the title of your topic on a note sheet or on a sticky pad or whatever, and you get up and you announce what that title is. You explain what it is you want to talk about, what problem you want to solve, and then you put your idea up on a board. So once everyone's had an opportunity to do that, then there is a period of some negotiating and some collaborative organizing where all of these ideas get moved around, combined, put into time slots, physical locations, and in a fairly short amount of time, you have got the agenda for the rest of the day figured out. And then you go into the conversations and the discussions. One of the things that's really critical then once you start having these conversations is that you capture the ideas. And so part of the responsibility of the convener is to have a note taker or mini note takers. This is where we started to bring in some technology. We used Box, a collaborative tool where multiple people could be taking notes simultaneously. We created a template where people could create those notes. And the template was designed not just to capture ideas, but then to guide these conversations to summarize what the most important points were at the end, and then also ideally create some action items out of their conversations before they finished up. And then all of those notes, all of those proceedings were compiled into one place so that anybody who was part of that, or actually anybody who was part of the community in general, could take a look at what the conversations were, what the topics were. We would come back at the end of the day to the circle, and we would have conversations. People would report about what they learned during the day, what the ideas that came up. And one of the things that you see here is you see these little green icons of people meeting. We would have conversation about sessions that had legs, and by that we meant what were some of the ideas that needed to continue on. Either they needed more time to explore, or they perhaps were ripe for some action that a small group of people were willing to work on. And so that's kind of how the Young Conferences worked. I think there were several really positive things that I have found come out of those. I think first and foremost is that people who participate in these come out of them feeling energized. I know that because I keep being asked, can you do another unconference? People really appreciated the opportunity to have their voices heard and to meet with people. I think that's the second really big key outcome of these, is that new relationships are developed, weak relationships are strengthened, maybe dysfunctional relationships are repaired. It really is a very good relationship building tool that then leads to better collaboration down the road. And then I think the third thing is that in many cases, really positive change did happen. Not in all cases. There were certainly things that kind of led to dead ends, or after the fact, people went back to their busy daily lives and did not get back to the commitments that they made during the day. But in general, positive action happened out of these events. If there's one thing that I think that I would like to find a way to improve on, is that in all of these conversations, I'd love to see better processes for getting creative ideas out. And that's really a matter of helping people understand how to facilitate creative processes, how to get everybody in a group to get their best ideas out. And so we're going to be talking a little bit more about that next week, and that's something that hopefully you can share when you go out into your organizations. So the second idea that I wanted to share was an idea of using an online platform to facilitate the creation of ideas and the curation of ideas. And so this is a screenshot from a thing that I did last year it was a campaign we called Reimagining IT at the University of Montana. And we did this on a platform called IdeaScale. We just piloted it for a year. Unfortunately, we no longer have the license, but it was a good exercise for us to use it. Um, what you can see here is that in about a 6-month process, we had a lot of people engage in this. We had 91 ideas posted, 565 comments on those ideas, and 1,359 votes. So that comes out to about an average of 6 comments per idea, and I think about 15 or so votes per idea. So this is, it's a tool that allows you to, take ideas both online. Also, a lot of these ideas did come from people who got onto this platform on the web and submitted ideas. But a lot of these ideas also came from face-to-face conversations, whether those were open forums, listening sessions, focus groups, or whatever. We took ideas that we heard from those and we posted them in here as well so that other people in the community could see those ideas and build on them, help us understand which ones they liked and didn't like by voting them up or down. And so what we did then is the group that we had working on this, there was about 12 to 14 of us. We took the initial ideation phase, which generated somewhere around 60 ideas, and we merged some of those together, the things that were consistent. We assessed the comments and the votes, and we pared it down into kind of an initial refinement to 24 ideas in these 5 different areas. And then we put those ideas back into IdeaScale, back online, and then we retested. We went back to our stakeholders and asked them to build on the ideas, to think about these ideas. And so each one of these had a little more detail about, what the proposal was, how it might work, and more conversation was generated. You also can see up there that we had some questions that helped us basically test whether the ideas were feasible. And so in this case, it doesn't look like we actually went through it and answered these questions, but just to give you an idea, we had these questions out there. Can this idea be completed with existing resources? Does this idea reduce complexity within systems, practices, or processes? And the third question, does this idea improve services or experiences for users of technology? And so, basically testing, can the idea, is it feasible? And is it a good idea? Does it actually help us move towards our goals? So, the reading that we had this week talks about co-creation as shifting the focus away from work processes to human engagement processes, from tasks to people. Both of these tools that I talked about a little bit today do that. The unconferences in particular, I recognized a fair amount of discomfort from leaders, campus leaders, administrators, and I think that comes from a couple of things. One, I think that there is some discomfort about giving up power. I think there's some discomfort about the fact that this looks really messy. It looks really time-consuming. A little bit of a lack of understanding about how these processes can actually lead to really positive results. And so certainly discomfort from the people who are in administrative positions. But on the other side, I saw in every single case, every one of these events that I was involved in, an incredible amount of enthusiasm from the employees and from the end users who were involved in the process. And so I guess my conclusion from that is that I think co-creation is both good strategy and it's good leadership. It is something that creates ideas that you wouldn't get otherwise, and it's something that creates engagement in your employees that you certainly wouldn't get otherwise. So I hope you've had a good week, and we will talk soon. Thank you.